I want to send my men to investigate in Henan.
Why?
He's insane. He can't kill me. So he'll paint me as a criminal instead.
Mr. Chief, could you please keep them open for at least another hour? And at least allow our citizens outside to come in.
How am I supposed to show him mercy? Where's the criminal? I want him questioned. I want a confession out of him.
They need to be dealt with.
Yes, sire.
Wait. How could I forget about her?
If your secret were to get out, it could be a problem.
Try your best just to meditate it quick, Lord. Oh man, not telling her to dance. I'm ding, Papa me chicken. Tell her say, glory to the master. Come on, help me shout this name. Can we press out free? Free. We got to be free.
Hallelujah be to the Most High God for giving me strength to praise His name. So I'm gonna preach the gospel of God.
I must apologize, 'cause I'm so sorry to treat you so cruel. All that was wrong, see, I was only playing.
Good afternoon to you from wherever you're watching this from. This is the live broadcast of the Senate on this Wednesday afternoon, the date being the 22nd of September 2021. We are so glad you're watching. A lot has been lined up before the House this afternoon, with the first debate being the motion on matters fuel, where the Senate Majority Leader will be moving a censure motion on Honorable John Munyes, the Cabinet Secretary for Petroleum and Mining, as well as Honorable Charles Keter. This is the Cabinet Secretary for Energy. That aware that on the 15th of September 2021, a statement was requested under Standing Orders number 48, subsection 1. This is in regard to the recent increase in fuel prices by the Energy, Petroleum and Regulatory Authority. Noting that the said Cabinet Secretaries failed to honor the invitation to attend a meeting before the committee, and further aware that this increase in fuel prices has outraged a majority of Kenyans who bear the brunt. This is due to the effects of the increase of such cost of transportation, high cost of fuel prices, food cost, high cost of electricity, among other adverse effects on the most sectors of the economy. Now, therefore, Senate expresses a grave concern. This is on the unprecedented increase in the fuel as well as electricity costs and the adverse effects that have had on the economy as well as the livelihoods of the people of Kenya. Members of the House will be deliberating on that particular motion, and the House will equally be resuming debate on a couple of bills. The Disaster Risk Management Bill by Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr., Senate Bill number 14 of 2021, is in its second reading stage. The Law of Succession Amendment Bill Senate Bill number 15 of 2021 by Senator Abshiro Halake is also lined up for debate, and so is the Public-Private Partnership Bill, National Assembly Bill number 6 of 2021. You can also follow up on this broadcast on our live YouTube channels, that is on the Senate of Kenya, as well as on KBC Channel 1. And just to move on with the highlighting what has been listed in the order of business this afternoon, the Committee of the Whole will be considering the Office of the County Printer Bill, Senate Bill number 13 of 2021 by Senator Petronila Were Lukorio. The same committee will also be considering the Investment Promotion Amendment Bill, as well as the Natural Resources Benefit Sharing Bill, Senate Bill number 25 of 2020. The Speaker of the House, Honorable Kenneth Lusaka, has just stepped into the chamber. I'll now hand you over for the live broadcast. My name is Gladys Mungai. Enjoy your viewing. Good afternoon.
And let us pray. Almighty God, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor and blessings as your servants whom you have been pleased to call to leadership positions in this republic. We seek guidance to treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you have committed to our charge. Amen.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
The leader of majority. Whip you.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the Senate today, Wednesday, 22nd September 2021. Report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of TETU Aberdare Water and Sanitation Company Limited for the year ended 30th June 2019.
Next order.
Order number 6, notice of motion.
Senator Cherargei. Yeah, he's not there. Next order.
Order number 7, statements.
Senator Gertrude Musurve.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to make a statement of general topical concern, the statement of the International Day of Sign Languages. Honorable Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 47-1 to make a statement on an issue of general topical concern, namely the International Day of Sign Languages. Mr. Speaker, sir, the world marks the International Day of Sign Language on Thursday, 23rd September 2021, to raise awareness on the importance of sign language in the full realization of the human rights of people who are deaf. This year's theme is We Sign for Human Rights. The day is celebrated in conjunction with the International Week of the Deaf. That is the WFD. Mr. Speaker, sir, the United Nations General Assembly on 19th December 2017 declared that every September 23rd will be marked as the Sign Language Day. September 23rd is in itself a memorable date as it marks the day the World Federation of the Deaf was established in 1951. The World Federation of the Deaf estimates that there are 72 million deaf people in the world. Out of this population, 80% live in developing countries. This day is therefore important as it presents the chance to support and protect the linguistic identity and cultural diversity of all deaf people and other sign language users. The first International Day of Sign Languages was marked in 2018. Honorable Speaker, this year's theme highlights how each of us, that is both the deaf and the hearing people around the world, can work together hand in hand to promote the recognition of the right to use sign languages in all areas of life. This is indeed the essence of inclusion. In a truly inclusive society, sign language ought to be a language for everyone, that is both hearing and deaf population, since the deaf do not live in a society of their own. It is important for everyone to know that sign language is a means of communication and conveys messages, just like verbal messages do. Unlike verbal languages, sign language uses manual codes and symbols to convey messages. Contrary to popular belief, sign languages are not the gestural translation of spoken languages. They are in fact fully fledged natural languages that are structurally different from spoken languages. Deaf people all around the globe collectively use more than 300 sign languages. Honorable Speaker, on March 30th, 2007, Kenya signed the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which entered into full force in 2008 and ratified it in May 5th, 2008. The purpose of the convention is to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by all people with disabilities. The convention recognizes and promotes the use of sign language. It makes it clear that sign languages are equal in status to spoken languages. It therefore obligates state parties to facilitate the learning of sign language and promote the linguistic identity of the deaf community. The world needs to know that in walking the talk, salient sessions of these rights are enshrined in the Constitution of Kenya in Article 7(1)(b), Article 54, and Article 120. Honorable Speaker, in fulfilling this constitutional mandate, Senator Professor Margaret Kamar and I have sponsored the Kenyan Sign Language Bill 2021. The bill seeks to obligate both the national and county governments and their agencies to take a multi-sectoral human rights approach in effecting the articles in the Constitution. The bill also seeks to provide for the inclusion of sign language in Kenya's education curriculum to ensure that the deaf and hard of hearing are integrated into the society and gain access to justice, education, and employment, to provide the use of sign language in legal proceedings, to promote access to public services by deaf persons, to provide support for deaf by teaching KSL to significant others of the deaf, that is siblings, parents, guardians of the deaf, and deaf child, and for connected purposes. Honorable Speaker, as we mark the International Day of Sign Languages, Kenyans need to know that the membership of the Senate is truly inclusive and in support of laws that enhance the human rights perspective of persons with disabilities. That is PWDs. Senator Professor Kamar and I are also sponsoring the Special Needs Education Bill of 2021, while Senator Dr. Milgo and I are sponsoring the Sign Language Interpreters Bill of 2021. All these bills are aimed at fulfilling the various articles in the Constitution and ensuring that there are specific laws that promote an inclusive human rights approach in sign language awareness, which translate to a truly inclusive society. Honorable Speaker, as we join the global community in commemorating this day, I wish to express my gratitude to all my colleagues for the support they have continuously shown in executing legislative matters that seek to improve the lives of persons with disabilities. Lastly, in marking this day, I'll be donating sign language books and materials to various national libraries to be stored in the Africana or references section for hearing people to access and learn sign language. Happy International Day of Sign Languages to every Kenyan and the entire world. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Sylvia Kasanga. Just a minute, Senator Sylvia. I can see there's some interest. Senator Wario. You wanted to say something? Okay.
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipa nafasi. Mheshimiwa Spika, lugha ya ishara ni muhimu katika dunia ya leo. Kwa kweli kuna wale ambao hawajabahatika kuweza kuongea ili waweze kueleweka. Katika hali hiyo sasa, lugha ya ishara ni lugha ambayo inatumika dunia nzima. Kwa hivyo mimi ninaunga mkono hasa lugha hii ya ishara wakati watu wanaenda na kuisherekea, sababu hawa watu ni watu tunaishi na wao, ni ndugu zetu, ni watu ambao lugha hii yao inafaa ipewe kipaumbele katika mashule, katika vyuo vikuu, ili lugha hii ikuzwe. Na katika hali hiyo, wakati dunia nzima inaenda kusherekea lugha ya ishara, sisi pia hatuna budi kuongezeka katika dunia hiyo kubwa ili tuweze kuinua lugha ya ishara, sababu kunao watu wanaishi na sisi ambao ni wengi katika idadi ukiangalia dunia mzima. Na lugha hiyo, iwapo tutaenda kuisherekea na tuipatie kipaumbele katika mashule zote za dunia, hasa hapa kwetu, na vile serikali, kuna serikali mbili katika mfumo ya Kenya, serikali ya county na serikali ile kuu, zote zinafaa ziweze kuendeleza lugha ya ishara na ziweze kukuzwa, na pia tuunge mkono dunia mzima tuongezeke. Kwa hivyo mimi ninaunga mkono lugha hii ya ishara iweze kukuzwa katika mashule zetu zote, katika serikali, ngazi zote za serikali hapa Kenya, na pia tuongezeke katika dunia mzima wakati wanaenda kusherekea lugha hii ya ishara, ili wale wasiobahatika kuongea na kuweza kueleweka katika jamii waweze kupata kipaumbele na wao wajihisi kama ni wananchi na ni watu ambao wanaishi katika dunia. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, asante kwa kunipatia nafasi. Ninaunga mkono.
I can see other riders but are not allowed. Remember, we have a very serious motion before us this afternoon. So, Senator Kasanga, next statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise pursuant to Standing Order 47-1 to make a statement on an issue of general tropical concern, namely the joint observation mission of presidential, parliamentary and local government elections in Zambia by the Forum of Parliaments for Member States of the ICGLR. Mr. Speaker, the FP-ICGLR had the privilege to participate in a joint election observer mission in Zambia between 5th and 16th August 2021 alongside United Nations, African Union, the Common Market for East and Southern Africa, COMESA, and other election monitoring groups. The delegation from Kenya comprised members of FP-ICGLR drawn from both houses of parliament and led by the Right Honorable Speaker of the Senate, who serves as the president of the FP-ICGLR. The election observer mission entailed preparatory activities prior to the day of the voting exercise, such as training, mapping of the polling stations, polling centers, and the briefing sessions. Thereafter, the delegation engaged in observing the voting exercise, which included opening the polling stations, voting infrastructure and personnel, availability and management of voting material, tallying and announcement of the election results. Mr. Speaker, Zambia has a robust legal framework on elections. All electoral seats are contested through the first past the post system, with the exception of the president and the vice president, who are elected by simple majority. The winning presidential candidate and his or her running mate must receive more than 50% of the valid votes cast, 50% plus 1. If no presidential candidate receives 50% of the valid votes, a second round must be held within 37 days of the first election. Only the two candidates receiving the highest number of valid votes cast will be candidates in the second round election. The right to vote is extended to prisoners, and the electoral commissioners are accorded security of tenure. Additionally, campaigners run up to the night preceding the election. Campaigns run up to the night preceding the election. With respect to affirmative action, unlike in the Constitution of Kenya, there are no reserved seats for women in the National Assembly. However, Article 69 of the Constitutional Amendment Act of 2016 allows the President to nominate up to 8 persons to enhance gender representation in the National Assembly, and Article 45 of the Zambia Constitution states that the electoral system shall ensure gender equity in the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, sir, the 2021 general election took place against a backdrop of heightened political tension in the country, which was compounded by a shrinking economy made worse by the global COVID-19 pandemic that has resulted in increased socioeconomic inequalities, and social disenchantment by the citizens. Evidence of the heightened political situation was seen through the pockets of violence reported in the Zambian capital, Lusaka, as well as northern, southern, and Mchinga provinces, where supporters of the then governing Patriotic Front, PF, and the then opposition Party for National Development, UPND, clashed. Concerns over the increased spate of violence prompted the deployment of the military for the first time during an electoral process. Mr. Speaker, sir, elections in Zambia are held every 5 years on the second Thursday of August. Therefore, the elections took place on Thursday, 12th August 2021. 16 candidates contested the presidential election, but the political landscape was dominated by two major political parties, the PF, led by the then incumbent President Edgar Lungu, and the UPND, led by Hakainde Hichilema. This is the second time in a row the two candidates competed against each other for the presidency. 810 candidates contested for 156 out of 167 seats of the National Assembly. At the local level, 420 candidates contested for mayoral seats and as municipal council chairpersons. Elections were held for the 116 district councils and for councillors in over 1,600 wards. The voter turnout was at 70.6%, translating to a total of 4,959,000 votes cast out of a total registered 7,023,000 votes, with the opposition leader and presidential candidate of the UPND, Hakainde Hichilema, securing 2.8 million votes, and the incumbent President Edgar Lungu, who secured 1.8 million votes. Although the election infrastructure in Zambia is largely manual, the electoral process was found to be efficient. Most polling stations opened and closed on time. The use of KIMS kits was witnessed only in one polling center. The Electoral Commission of Zambia was well organized, and the electoral process was generally managed in an orderly manner. Mr. Speaker, sir, some of the lessons we can borrow from Zambia are such as: 1, it is crucial to engage swift diplomatic interventions in enabling state power transfer and to unlock, shape, catalyze electoral democratization processes. Behind the scenes, Zambia's fourth president, Rupia Banda, former Sierra Leone President Ernest Bai Koroma, and former Tanzanian President Jakaya Kikwete engaged President Edgar Lungu and Mr. Hichilema to facilitate a peaceful democratic transition. They did not wait for a formal Southern African Development Community SADC team once the former President Edgar Lungu and his team signaled their dissatisfaction with the results that were trickling in. 2, in Zambia, access to the voter register is readily available to the election officials and party agents. Therefore, the verification process of voters upon entry into the polling stations is done thoroughly by all the parties, thus mitigating against incidences of rigging. Additionally, the voter register contains registration details of the voter and photos of each voter. And 3, it is important to invest in independent institutions that outlast political parties or formations. In the case of Zambia, the army did not engage in the political shenanigans that were taking place. Mr. Speaker, sir, these are the areas as a country we need to engage in. Allow me, in conclusion, to take this opportunity to urge the Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights to take this time to assess the status of preparedness of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission in the upcoming elections in Kenya in 2022, and to table a report thereon so as, if gaps are observed, necessary interventions are made well ahead of time. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Kasanga, and I thank you because I was in that delegation, and I thank you for bringing the report on time. Thank you so much. The next statement is by Senator Millicent Omanga. She's not there, deferred. Senator Musuruve.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 48-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Health on the state of healthcare services to cancer patients in public health facilities in county. In the statement, the committee should: 1, provide per county statistics of cancer prevalence while indicating the capacity of the public health care facilities to deal with cancer in each county. 2, set the measures in place to ensure that patients with various types of cancer are accorded quality health care according to the type of cancer afflicting them. 3, provide the list of oncologists employed in public health facilities in each county. 4, set the targeted interventions to ensure that anesthetists, oncologists, and other medical personnel in public health facilities in counties are adequately facilitated in provision of quality health care to respective types of cancer patients. And 5, set the amount of public funds utilized for capacity building of the professionals in the area of cancer in the country in the last 1 year, highlighting the indicators of success. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Next order. There's a point of order. Senator Abdullahi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last week, Thursday, the minority leader stopped the business of the change of committees in the House, which is very important with some of our committees who are suffering for a long time because we didn't have enough membership. Once it was stopped, it was agreed that a Kamkunji will be held. Up to today, Mr. Speaker, we have no information of what is supposed to happen, and I'm informed some of the leadership in the House, including those ones on our side, do not want this Kamkunji to be held. So I want to request the Speaker to give direction on when we can hold the Kamkunji so that we can discuss on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator James Orengo.
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, it is true that I moved a motion to defer debate on the motions for the establishment of the committees in terms of membership because it looked like there was a bit of a disagreement, and asked the leadership to be given time to consult and thereafter, if possible, to hold a Kamkunji. I think we have generally consulted and agreed, and at yesterday's Senate Business Committee meeting, it was agreed that that consultation is necessary. On the part of the minority side, we are holding consultations tomorrow, and after our consultations, then we hope that we can meet with the majority side. And it's not a consultation which is exclusive. At least on the minority side, all the members will attend that consultations so that there is some consensus before the list is reintroduced into the chamber. But it was a resolution of the Senate Business Committee yesterday that we need to consult and the Kamkunji is required. I was hoping that tomorrow we'll approach your office and agree on that Kamkunji to be held next week. I know it is an urgent matter, like the Committee on Devolution cannot meet because they do not have enough membership at the moment. But I think it is important to have some consensus before the matter is formally introduced in the House.
That's okay. I will be available tomorrow for that consultation and direction. And I think it's important that the committees are constituted, because I'm also aware that we have members here who are not on any committees, and they need to participate in what goes on in the committees. Next order.
Order number 8, motion. Censure of Honorable John K. Munez, Cabinet Secretary for Petroleum and Mining, and Honorable Charles Keter, Cabinet Secretary for Energy.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to move the following motion. That aware that on the 15th of September 2021, a statement was requested under Standing Order number 48-1 regarding the recent increase of fuel prices by the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, that is EPRA. And whereas the Speaker of the Senate directed the Standing Committee on Energy to invite the Cabinet Secretaries of the Ministries of Petroleum and Mining and the Ministry of Energy to appear before the committee on Tuesday, the 21st September 2021, to apprise the committee and the entire Senate on the unprecedented escalation of fuel prices in the country. And whereas the Standing Committee on Energy invited the two cabinet secretaries pursuant to Article 153, sub-articles 3 and 4 of the Constitution to appear before the committee on Tuesday, 21st September 2021 at 11 a.m., noting that the said cabinet secretaries failed to honor the invitation to attend the meeting of the committee. Cognizant of the fact that the sharp increase in fuel prices in the country has had a ripple adverse effect on the economy, leading to a rise in the cost of living and the cost of doing business on an already overburdened citizenry grappling with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Further, aware that this increase in fuel prices has outraged a majority of Kenyans who bear the brunt of the effects of the increase, such as high costs of transportation, high food prices, high cost of electricity, among other adverse effects on most sectors of the economy. Now, therefore, the Senate expresses its grave concern on the unprecedented increase in fuel and electricity costs and the adverse effects that these have had on the economy and livelihoods of the people of Kenya, and to express its dissatisfaction with the conduct of the two cabinet secretaries, namely Honorable John K. Munyes, Cabinet Secretary for Petroleum and Mining, and Honorable Charles Keter, Cabinet Secretary for Energy, in failing to appear before the Senate to address these urgent issues, thereby abdicating their responsibilities as set out in Article 153, sub-articles 3 and 4 of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, sir, in moving this motion, first of all, let me commend the Committee on Energy and its chairman, because it has tried to grapple with this matter over time. And indeed, looking at the business of that committee, and I've had the occasion to look at their deliberations and even previous meetings before there was this escalation, it is a matter that has been appearing in the proceedings of the committee for over a period of time. And it was as if they knew this matter was going to come to its present status, where it has escalated and has been compounded with factors such as the COVID-19 pandemic. And I know that the chairman has sought on several occasions to bring to the notice of the House legislation on these matters generally, as enacted previously and in previous parliaments. And when this issue now arose beyond the capacities of the committee, questions were raised on the floor of this House. And I think it was both the distinguished senators from Nandi and the nominated senator from Kisumu County desired that statements be made on this very important issue. And the chairman again responded, but it was the feeling of the House that this matter now required the executive, the responsible cabinet secretaries, to appear before the House and in a committee of the whole House, not the Committee of the Energy, to give explanation on this very important matter that affects the lives of all our people, people in business, ordinary citizens, going about their lives. And it was not without significance that the Speaker ordered that the two cabinet secretaries appear before the Committee of the Whole. And of course, yesterday, the House, the Committee of the Whole met, but the cabinet secretaries did not attend. And I think part of the influence of the House was that not the fact that there was non-compliance and contempt for the House for purposes of these particular proceedings on the rising costs of fuel and electricity, but also the appearance before various committees of the cabinet, various cabinet secretaries before various committees had taken a very bad turn, because it was notorious by the very non-observance by the cabinet secretaries, whether they were invited or summoned. And you have some cabinet secretaries responding, not even officially, to these invitations by saying that the matter is not a part of their docket, or that Senate does not have those responsibilities. And I think this is an important occasion on when we can send a message clearly to the executive, because this is something that does not apply just to individual cabinet secretaries, including the ones who wish to censure today, but to all other public officers who have a duty to appear when invited or when summoned by Parliament, including the Senate. Now, it is important also to note the significance of a censure motion. The censure motion may be a little different from a motion of no confidence, but I think the effect and impact on the individual ministers or cabinet secretary is more or less the same. Under our present constitutional order, there must be an appropriate process for the removal of a cabinet secretary, but that does not mean that this House cannot censure or express its lack of confidence on any individual cabinet secretary. And this thing is so serious, and I want to remind the House and those who are here before, including the Attorney General Emeritus, motions of censure or motions of no confidence on various cabinet secretaries, and at that time they were called ministers, have been moved in Parliament. And the significance of moving those motions was never lost, not just to Parliament, but to the executive and to the individual cabinet secretaries who are subject to motions of no confidence or motion of censure. And the practice has been, in Kenya, at least in one incident that I can demonstrate, and elsewhere in the Commonwealth, or even in a system where they practice pure presidential systems, that when a motion of censure is moved by Parliament or any of the chambers of Parliament, willy-nilly you'll find that the cabinet secretary or the minister would resign even before the matter is discussed. Or they would not defend themselves. They will hear what Parliament has to say, and then they will resign. If the motion is against the leader of government, then willy-nilly, not only will that leader resign, but the entire ministers would resign, because there has been an expression of no confidence on the leader of the government. And you know, this is what happened on the 27th of April 1989, when there was a motion of no confidence. And I hope Senator Wetangula would correct me if I'm wrong, that under the old constitution there was provision for moving a motion of no confidence on the government of the Republic of Kenya. But there was no procedure for movement, no clear procedures for censuring or moving a motion of no confidence against a minister. But willy-nilly, over the years, there were such motions moved. But one of them, which was critical, was the motion of no confidence moved on the 27th of April 1989 against the Vice President, Mr. Josephat Karanja. And he did not defend himself. He resigned. And I should quickly add that that motion does not arise out of non-compliance with the summons, failure to honor a summons, or failure to honor an invitation. But what I'm trying to say, that when Parliament expresses itself on a motion like this, its significance is enormous. And the practice in the House of Commons, and I've been doing some little reading, and even in a presidential system like in the United States of America, where on certain occasions the Congress would express its displeasure on the behavior or conduct of federal officials. Once those motions hit the floor of the House, the concerned parties at least would show seriousness, and a lot of them would even, before the motion is moved, try to purge the contempt. They would try to plead to the Speaker or reach out to the leader of the House, be it the majority leader or the minority leader, or use any one of the members of Parliament to purge the contempt and even convince Parliament or the relevant committee or the relevant member not to proceed with the motion because of the consequences of the motion, which, according to the Constitution, does not result in a removal, but it's so weighty that it cannot be taken lightly by the individual cabinet secretary. In these instances, even from yesterday and the week before, when we have been engaged with this matter, in the hope that they would try to purge the contempt or reach out to give some explanation, nothing of the sort has happened, at least to my knowledge, except on the part of the cabinet secretary in charge of energy, who, through the distinguished senator from Turkana, informed me that he was landing in Turkana with a delegation from southern Sudan. But that being so, and that may be an exigency of duty, I've known that when a motion of this nature is pending before Parliament, whatever the exigencies of duty are, the public official will defer to Parliament first before attending to those other duties. But in this instance, the way Parliament is being treated is that when you have some other business, whatever it is, then that business is important than the invitation or summons by Parliament. And I think this practice must really stop, and we must speak loudly on this occasion to remind those concerned that a summon or an invitation by the Houses of Parliament is an important instrument, is an important instrument under the law, and which requires those concerned parties to appear before either the National Assembly or the Senate. And I would, Mr. Speaker, commend the practice amongst the executive members in South Africa, because for them, even the president, when he is summoned, he appears. All of them appears. But in our instance, particularly for the Senate, this is becoming a practice that continues to take place unabated and is a is a malfunction that must be corrected. Mr. Speaker, you would remember that in the old days, when you received a summon from a chief under the Chiefs Act and you failed to attend, it had consequences. And until that act was amended, if you disobeyed an order by the chief, you could be prosecuted. Although under the law, under that act to be prosecuted, consent was required from the Attorney General. And I'm glad that for the moment the Attorney General Emeritus was Attorney General, he never gave consent for a member of Parliament to be prosecuted for disobeying an order from the chief. But people tended to obey the orders. Now, Mr. Speaker, this summons, just to recapitulate what the law itself says, because some people may think that we are just acting in vain, and there's no legal basis for us to do these things. And Mr. Speaker, as contained in the body of the motion, the appropriate articles of the Constitution have been cited, and that is Article 153, Sub-Article 3. And I think we have referred to this article many times in this House. And for what it is worth, because it has been read many times in this House, let me just read it again. And it says, Sub-Article 3, a cabinet secretary shall attend before a committee of the National Assembly or the Senate when required by the committee, and answer any question concerning a matter for which the cabinet secretary is responsible. For purposes of the invitation regarding the two cabinet secretaries, we are talking about electricity and fuel, and obviously there is no doubt that they're being called upon to answer on questions that relate to their responsibilities under their particular area of jurisdiction. And Mr. Speaker, that is also in consonance with the oath of office that they took, the solemn oath of affirmation of due execution of office for cabinet secretaries. When they were appointed and before they took responsibility, they had to subscribe to this oath as required under the Constitution, because the Constitution says you cannot take those responsibilities before you take the appropriate oath. And that oath required of cabinet secretaries to obey and respect and uphold this Constitution of Kenya and other laws of the Republic of Kenya. And so far, I've dealt with the Constitution, the constitutional provisions, which require that they attend when they are required to do so. And then this oath, to leave the matter, not in doubt, says as much. And then there's the general power of Parliament. Again, for record, because this has been quoted many times, cited many times in this House, in relation to the power of Parliament to call for evidence. And calling for evidence applies not only to the House itself, but also to committees. And it says, Article 125, Sub-Article 2, for the purposes of Clause 1, a House of Parliament and any of its committees has the same powers as the High Court to enforce the attendance of witnesses and examine them on oath, affirmation, or otherwise. B, to compel the production of documents, and C, to issue a commission or request to examine witnesses. So the Constitution itself talks about the power to call witnesses, or to call for evidence or to summon any person. But it says if you do not attend or you do not appear, then the Senate will have the powers of the High Court, not of the Magistrates Court, because those of you who appear before a Magistrates Court, if you disobey an order by a magistrate, the consequences are dire. Or even a police officer, when you are appropriately summoned to appear before a police station. And many of us here have been required to appear before a police officer or before a police station. But in this respect, Parliament is given the powers of a superior court to compel the power to enforce the attendance of witnesses. And it does not say that, witnesses can only be ordinary mortals. Witnesses includes anybody, a citizen or a citizen or a non-citizen of Kenya. So these things is good to put them in context. And then the mother of them all are the Powers and Privileges Act. And again, these have been cited before this House, but for purposes of record again, Mr. Speaker, you allow me to cite them. There is Section 18 of the Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Act, summoning of witnesses. And that Section 18 has the heading Invitation and Summoning of Witnesses. And it says, Parliament or its committees may invite or summon any person to appear before it for the purpose of giving evidence or providing any information, paper, book, record, or document in the possession or under the control of that person. And in this respect, Parliament and its committees shall have the same powers as the High Court as specified in Article 125 of the Constitution. So this power under the Powers and Privileges Act is so important because it is a derivative of the Constitution. They flow from the Constitution itself. And then Section 19 deals with the procedure of if witnesses fail to appear. And in this regard, the law is telling us that, if witnesses fail to appear, you are not a toothless bulldog. You are given these powers. And it says, where a witness summoned does not appear, or appears but fails to satisfy the relevant House of Parliament or committee, the relevant House or committee may impose upon the witness such fine not exceeding 500,000 shillings, and having regard to the witness's condition in life and all the circumstances of the case. And now we are not talking about an ordinary mortal. The circumstance in this case is a cabinet secretary who has taken oath or subscribed to an oath, who has got an office, a public office, and in exercise of that public office, the law requires that they appear. Then, for interest, there is another very important section in the Powers and Privileges Act, Parliamentary Powers and Privileges Act, which I think we should always bear in mind, because it talks about public officers. And it says, no public officer shall refuse, and I shall repeat, no public officer shall refuse to produce before Parliament or a committee any paper, book, or record or document, or give evidence before Parliament or a committee relating to the correspondence of any national security organ. So even when it concerns national security, which would be the best excuse for any cabinet secretary to give, Parliament says, this act says, you cannot use national security as a basis of refusing to produce a document or to give evidence or to appear. And I think these are very important in terms of giving context to this matter. So we have these powers not made ordinarily by us because, they flow from the Constitution, and they have a purpose. They have a purpose. And I want to say and, share with you, and hope you will agree with me, that for cabinet secretaries to appear before Parliament, it serves a constitutional purpose as set out in Article 10 of the Constitution. For purposes of transparency, for purposes of good governance, for purposes of accountability, and also for purposes of public participation when decisions are being made. Because, the sovereign, which is the people, when we require members of the government to appear before us, we do so on behalf of the people. And that flows from Article 1, Sub-Article 1 of the Constitution. So there's a constitutional purpose and objective. It is not just a law made out of context. It's a law that serves a constitutional purpose. So my brothers and sisters, honorable senators, I think this is a matter in which we have to come in forcefully for purposes of not just this Senate, but for future parliaments. Because if we have an executive that is not prepared to be accountable to the people, because now the people are crying out there about this fuel and electricity costs. And those who have been given this responsibility want to know why. And in exercise of our duty as elected representatives of the people, we have summoned the people concerned to appear before Parliament to give that explanation. And they have failed to do so. Now, I think that if you ask me, this is a matter in which there is no reason, there is nothing that has been placed before the House that can demonstrate that the cabinet secretaries, any one of them, had any justifiable reasons not to appear before the Senate. And none has been brought to my notice, if at all they have sent any such explanation. Mr. Speaker, there was a famous American jurist who said that, the breakdown of law and order does not start by very serious breaches of the law. They start by little violation, which end up, polluting and contaminating the whole public order and good governance. And therefore, this is not an idle matter. This is a constitutional violation. And the consequences of this in terms of what is required of public officers, if you look at the article in the Constitution that defines who is a public officer or what is a public office, cabinet secretaries qualify because a state officer is a public officer. And all these laws, therefore, apply to them. Now, I want to talk about a situation where in the past, even in the old parliament, there were committee systems. But they died. And they died because there was one time, I remember when the committee on public accounts of the National Assembly, and there was also a joint committee of Foreign and Defense Committee, summoned the relevant ministers. And in respect of of the Public Accounts Committee, they had required what was called the Big Five. I think the Attorney General Emeritus You remember there was a time when the Big Five will be required to appear before the Public Accounts Committee. And the executive at that time was very happy with the Big Five going to the Public Accounts Committee, but not to any other committee of the House. So when ministers were summoned to the Committee of Foreign Affairs and Public and Defense, and I think at that time Koigu Wamwere was the chairman, and if I'm wrong, then he was the chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. The president at that time said, how can Parliament summon a minister, my minister? Parliament cannot do a thing like that. And by that pronouncement, Mr. Speaker, the committee system died because by executive fiat, we were told you can never summon a minister. And it looks like if you continue like this, ministers will begin to say that, we have no powers to summon them. They can come when they want. In fact, they are already conducting themselves as if we don't have those powers. And you call them and they say, the Senate does not have those powers. I think the excuse now, which they keep on repeating, is that Senate has no responsibilities when it comes to the national government. But the Constitution is clear. The Constitution does not make a distinction as between the powers of the National Assembly and the Senate, or the committees of the Senate and the committees of the National Assembly, that both houses or the committees of both houses have powers to summon cabinet secretaries. And it's not for a reason that specifically the power to summon a cabinet secretary, it is provided for in the Constitution. If it was something in the standing orders or in the Powers and Privileges Act, probably we would not take it seriously. But this is a matter that is provided for in the Constitution of Kenya. And if for any reason we are to tell the public that we cannot be able to explain what has happened in regard to these increases on the cost of fuel and electricity, if we were to go to the public and told them that, we failed to summon, or the ministers failed to appear, then the authority and therefore I invite the House on this regard, that on this first component of this motion, this first component of the motion, that we censure these two cabinet ministers. And it has nothing to do with politics. It's like being summoned by the court. You receive a summons from an appropriate authority. You are summoned by the investigative agencies. It has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with religion. When Parliament summons you, and in the committee of the House, we got members of all shades. When you're summoned to appear, you have no duty. If you're a cabinet secretary that has taken the oath of office and knows his responsibilities under the Constitution and the law, your duty is to appear. And I think Kenya, at least we should be showing good examples to our neighbors. But it looks like now it is our neighbors who are giving us these examples. We should be leading from the front, but instead, somebody goes to Zambia. We have just had a report here on the elections in Zambia, and we are very happy about it, how in Zambia they could have free and fair elections. We could have access to the register without interference. Some people cite, like I've cited South Africa, where the president is summoned to appear before Parliament or a committee of Parliament. He appears. He is summoned by a commission, like the Zonda Commission, that is looking into state capture. Ministers appear, presidents appear, former presidents appear. So I do not see in Kenya the special case for cabinet secretaries to choose to come to Parliament or not, that we leave it to their discretion. I think we must tell them that this power that is given to Parliament is derived from the Constitution. And if we do not use that power to ensure that there is transparency, accountability, and transparency in the conduct of business of Parliament, then the whole democratic constitutional structure would have no meaning. And therefore, on this first component, I invite you to agree with me that the conduct of the two cabinet secretaries requires a censure. And I think we should not be in the business of trying to determine whether it was an invitation or a summon. Because the Constitution, the law itself says you can invite or summon. The Senate has been so kind, our committees have been so kind. They invite, they give you a certain number of days to appear, and then subsequently summon. The choice, the discretion is not to the Cabinet Secretary, the discretion is of the Senate or the committee to decide how you are going to be made to appear through an invitation or through a summon. That word invitation should not be read in its popular parlance that is like you are being invited for a tea party. You are being invited to an important business of state which you must perform. So on this first limb of the motion, is actually the second limb of the motion, I invite all of us to censure these two ministers. And of course, the consequences of it, then the relevant committee, since it was under the direction of the relevant committee which was dealing with the matter, sanctions should be taken against the two cabinet secretaries. It should not just be this resolution by the Senate in plenary. I think there must be some sanctions, and the punishment is set out, as I've read, in the Powers and Privileges Act. And Mr. Speaker, you know, the problem with this particular matter is that the invitation was not just by the chair. It was through the order of the Speaker. You are one of the state officials, very few, that when you are presiding over our deliberations, you wear a special dress of honor. And in the order of things, looking at the order of, in terms of protocol and seniority, Mr. Speaker, you are so high up. You're so high up that when you speak, you know, heaven and earth should move. It is, the Speaker is there very high up in the order of things, both as a member of this House and the Speaker of Parliament. Now, on the second one, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to say much about this because already the out there is crying. And many members have expressed themselves, even yesterday, during the debate on the cost of fuel and electricity. Every one of us have talked about the fact that these prices or escalation of prices and costs of fuel and electricity is unbearable. And Mr. Speaker, I've tried to look for all sorts of literature available from official sources, from publications from all over the world, up to this morning. And it demonstrates that the cost of fuel in Kenya in relation to other countries is extremely high. Is extremely high. Indeed, by the communication made by EPRA itself, it categorized our fuel costs as one of the highest in the continent. And I cannot believe why costs of fuel in Kenya should be higher than Uganda. There must be some explanation for that. And Mr. Speaker, in fact, on this matter, all these publications agree and leaving out the oil-producing countries, which are quite a number in Africa, including Nigeria, Angola, whose costs are lower in comparison to Kenya. But I would not understand why a country like Swaziland, the cost of oil in Swaziland are better than those in Kenya. Why the cost of oil in Namibia, Mozambique, the DRC, a country which is experiencing a lot of problems. I know it has got a small enclave where there's oil, Cabinda, but that enclave is perpetually in a state of insurrection. Tanzania, Zambia, Rwanda, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, maybe it has oil, I don't know, Malawi, Uganda, Cameroon. In fact, in that list, in more than about 50 African countries, we stand at about number 30 in terms of cost of oil. That requires some kind of explanation. And I am glad that the Secretary of the Cabinet Secretary in charge of petroleum, in one of his interactions with the Parliament, I think on the 14th day, Monday the 14th, 2021, Secretary Munez is quoted as urging Parliament to review taxation on petroleum as the best option of cautioning consumers from a rising energy costs. So it didn't talk about the pandemic. It didn't talk about anything else. He said it is Parliament who has got that responsibility. Now, Parliament does what it is always required to do under the law. It gives the minister or the regulatory authority some discretion. But that discretion must be applied in a manner that does not cause, unhappiness or cause unnecessary burdens on the people. Why would EPRA, in the current circumstances, decide to increase the prices of oil? It is not because of legislation, because that power that they were given as a regulatory authority must be administered in a way that is conscious or takes into consideration the condition of the ordinary Kenyans. I must say that that this time around, I must agree with the National Assembly. Arising out of the proceeding yesterday, they are required, at least by the direction of the Speaker, that they come with a report within 30 days, the Committee on Finance, with a draft legislation on how to deal with this rising fuel costs. And I remember the last time when there was a question of debt and the question of the levy, petroleum levy and VAT. We did make noise as a House, but we didn't have those tools with which to make an intervention. And Mr. Speaker, probably I may conclude by saying this. In the United States, the powers of the Senate came over time. The kind of sibling rivalry between the two houses was there in the United States as it is here now. And most of the powers, including budget making, were with the House of Representatives. But over time, they have realized that if you include Senate in some of these issues, including even the process of budget making, then you are better off than dealing with it as one chamber. For example, if taxes are increased, it affects counties, without a doubt. And I do not see any reason why Senate should not be involved. If taxes are reduced, similarly counties will be affected. And when it comes to national revenue, where we have an entry point of determination of the share, horizontally between the national and county governments, that we have some role to play. But I think the most important duty of any parliament is the issues of taxation. And I think this should be a shared responsibility in time. And we'll never stop making that case, as observed by the Supreme Court. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by saying sometimes building a big house, you can build a big house, but if you have nothing inside it, that house to eat, you'll still not resolve the problem. In Kenya, I think it is good that we are working hard on our infrastructure. It's good for the economy, it's good for the people, but if the people's pockets are empty, or if the standard of living is too high for the people, or the cost of living is too high, then some of these major capital expenditures we are making may not benefit the people at the end. So for the future, our government should be very clear on the issues of debt and on the issues of taxation. As I said yesterday, the American Revolution was, was based on the question of taxation. Somebody said taxation without representation is like tyranny. But I say that over-taxation, like I said yesterday, is slavery. If all you're working for in your life is consumed by tax, then your spirit for hard work will be eliminated. So the authorities must always be thinking that as you want to do certain things which may be good for public good, you must always be conscious of the fact that people need to eat, people need to have shelter, and people need to have good hospitals and medicine, and people need clothing. For example, Mr. Speaker, there are people in this town, and Senator Sakaja is a better place to talk about this, but there are a lot of people in this town who earn 10,000 shillings a month. Now, if you're earning 10,000 shillings a month, and the cost of boarding a matatu goes up by even 3 shillings out of that 10,000 shillings. We can be talking about this republic, what good things we're doing, but for that man who has to pay an extra 3 shillings out of 10,000 shillings for transport, return, and even if it is 50 shillings or 100 shillings, 3 shillings on top means a lot. And fuel, so long as you increase fuel, you're increasing the cost of foodstuff, of medicine, of transport, and even of housing. It is a commodity, it's a primary commodity. It's not a commodity that one can say it affects only one sector. Even in terms of production, fuel and cost of fuel and electricity are primary. They are primary towards production. And if you want people to generate more wealth, you have to be very careful how you increase cost of fuel and so on. And I hope that at the end of this, we by resolution, we censure, and secondly, we urge the National Assembly to speed up the legislation, the contemplated legislation to deal with this matter. And Senate probably can make a representation by way of a message that legislation is required like yesterday. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I move and ask Senator Wetangula to second. I thank you.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, I was wondering where Senator Cheriot was when the motion started. There was once a committee to investigate land clashes, and when it came to voting, half of the members of the committee disappeared. Mr. Speaker, I beg to second. And Mr. Speaker, as I second, I want to urge this House, and I can see in front of me great men and women, behind me great men and women, that this is a patriotic duty. It has nothing to do with your brother, it has nothing to do with your party, it has everything to do with the people of Kenya and what we are going through. Mr. Speaker, yesterday in a committee of the whole, as you directed, chaired by the distinguished Senator for Nyeri, it turned out that two ministers who you had directed to be summoned, but instead they were invited, did not show up in the committees. Mr. Speaker, if the Hansard was to be circulated, I think the speech of the day in the House Committee of the Whole was from the Attorney General Emeritus, Amos Wako, who spoke his heart out on these issues. And Mr. Speaker, members of committees in this House know that when a minister is unable to come to a committee on invitation or summons, the very least they do is normally send their peers or any other senior officer to come and tender an apology and explanation to the committee. We all understand that sometimes you may not be available for this or that reason. But Mr. Speaker, in yesterday's meeting, and my good friend the chair is here, there was not a single representation from any of these two ministries. Not even a press officer from the minister's office to just come and tell us that we are sorry, we are not available today. Nothing. And I did say, Mr. Speaker, in a crisis moment as this, the Minister for Petroleum, wherever he was, would have cut short his speech, his trip, and come back to the country to address this issue. Nothing has happened, Mr. Speaker. And as we speak here, I join Senator Orengo in also opining that I don't think we have received any explanation, even from the proceedings of yesterday that were aired live, from any of these ministries about what happened. Mr. Speaker, I heard the Minister for Energy saying that what he was invited for does not concern him. Mr. Speaker, that is an assault on the dignity and authority of the chair of this House. On the day when we canvass this matter, Mr. Speaker, and the Hansard is here to bear you out as our Speaker, the distinguished senator from Kisumu, Rose Nyamunga, stood up and said, Mr. Speaker, and I quote, "Yesterday, I was shocked when I got a bill of 53,000 in electricity consumption, yet I've been paying around 18,000 or 19,000. Anytime you complain, they come to read your meter, then they tell you that is what they found on the meter. What is going on in this country? It should not continue like this. Something should be done. There is a big problem in that ministry. We know what the problem is, but we are not solving it." Then she went on, Mr. Speaker. Then at the end of the conversation and submissions on the floor, I requested you, Mr. Speaker, that following what Senator Nyamunga had said, and the country is bleeding and hurting because of high electricity bills are now fuel, kindly order the invitation of the two twin ministers to come before the House. And you did order. And Mr. Speaker, to vindicate the office of the clerk, we were told that the letters of invitation carried the Hansard of the day, so that each minister would know what they were coming to be questioned about. So Minister Keter cannot and should not and cannot be allowed to say that what was on the floor of the House and before the committee does not concern him, because it squarely concerns him. In any case, Mr. Speaker, the article in the Constitution that Senator Orengo has quoted repeatedly, Article 153, when the House and its committees summon a minister, it doesn't matter on what matter. It doesn't. All the House needs to do is invite or summon a minister, and they are duty-bound to even miss cabinet and come to the House of Parliament to answer to the representatives of the people of Kenya. And Mr. Speaker, every minister, when they take oath of office, they say, and I quote in Kiswahili, nitahifadhi, nitailinda, na nitaitetea katiba ya nchi yetu ya Kenya. By doing so, you are adhering studiously to every single provision in the Constitution, including but not limited to being required to go to Parliament to answer questions, because that is what government must do. That is what the responsibility of government is. But to date, Mr. Speaker, we have no answers. We have no responses. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, this House must stand up in unison. Our censure may not lead to these ministers leaving office, but it's a blot on their character. It's a blot on their career. That indeed, they were given responsibility, and it becomes a matter of future reference on them that they snubbed Parliament, they abdicated responsibility, they were unresponsive to the plight of Kenyans, and they were uncaring in the discharge of our duties and responsibilities. That is what it is, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in comparable jurisdictions, Mr. Speaker, in Northern Ireland, the Attorney General of Northern Ireland, who was then a counterpart of Amos Wako, the police were looking for a suspect of IRA, and they found him hiding in the servants' quarters of the Attorney General. It was proven that the Attorney General didn't even know that that fellow was in his quarters. He promptly resigned and went home, Mr. Speaker. In Tanzania, during the time of President Magufuli, a friend of mine who was a minister failed to go to Parliament to answer questions. Magufuli promptly dismissed him. And he left cabinet. Mr. Speaker, this has happened in many places. There was a minister in the UK, Mr. Speaker, and it has been doing rounds even on social media, who arrived late in Parliament to answer a question, and the Speaker censured him. He promptly resigned and left cabinet. He didn't fail to arrive, he arrived late. These ones don't even arrive, don't even explain, don't say anything. They are now, Mr. Speaker, behaving and talking the language of Simon Art Garfunkel and Paul Simon of the sound of silence. And we want to tell them that the sound of silence is louder than spoken words. We need, Mr. Speaker, the President to tell his ministers that they have a duty to him as they have a duty to Parliament, because it's the House of Representatives. Anything that is touching and affecting the people, Mr. Speaker, must be dealt with in this House. Over the weekend, Madam Speaker, I was in Busia County, represented by distinguished Amos Wako. Mr. Speaker, there was a queue of vehicles of Kenyans crossing to Uganda to buy fuel. Fuel to Uganda, to Rwanda, to Burundi, to Eastern Congo is imported through Mombasa, passes through Kenya. How come fuel in Goma, Boni and Butembo in Congo is cheaper than fuel in Kenya? Mr. Speaker, it doesn't make any economic sense. And Mr. Speaker, now it's time that this House must relook at a bill that was drafted by leadership of Senator Murkomen, that was brought to this House to amend the Constitution, to give authority to this House, Mr. Speaker, as a house of reference on all bills coming from the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, the Supreme Court, in the advisory, told the country and this House that the judges did not envisage any situation under the sun where any legislation did not concern counties. That whether you are talking of police, the theater of security is in the county. Whether you are talking of taxation, the affected people are in the counties. We must, Mr. Speaker, as we move to the future, demystify the definition of the so-called money bills in Article 114. So that especially taxation, Mr. Speaker, when you go to the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker, and members themselves tell us that when a bill comes to the House, they're allowed to speak for a maximum of 2 minutes each. What can you speak on taxation, Madam Speaker, for 2 minutes? And you turn progressively a House of Parliament into a voting machine. In fact, it becomes now an extension of the executive. People sit in the Treasury. They don't interact with ordinary people. They don't know how ordinary people are hurting. They simply think that tax the Kenyan as much as you can to solve your problems. Madam Speaker, I don't believe the explanation being channeled out, and I listened to the proceedings in the National Assembly. Unfortunately, many members of the National Assembly were behaving like apologists of the Treasury. Mr. Speaker, I heard one member saying that this extremely high punitive and oppressive taxation is because of our debts. Mr. Speaker, Mutula Kilonzo and I sit in the committee, Madam Speaker, of Finance. We were chaired by the distinguished Senator for Mandera. The Minister for Finance appeared before us and said he is raising the debt ceiling so that he can opt to take concessional borrowing and retire expensive debts. To debt.
That's fine. Honorable members, I will propose a question that clause 4 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. I now put the question that clause 4 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I now put the question that clause 4 as amended be part of the bill. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Clause 5. I propose a question that clause 5 be part of the bill, no amendment to it. I therefore put the question that clause 5 be part of the bill. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? All the members? Yes. You have to vote. I'll put that again. I now put the question that clause 5 be part of the bill. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Clause 6. I propose a question that clause 6 be part of the bill. We have an amendment by the Honorable Chair. Yes, Honorable Sophia.
And Chair, this amendment is in the order paper, and it means that we propose to reduce the quorum of the conducting business for the board members from 7 to 5. Despite it being proposing increase of the number of board members from 9 to 12, and that is against Mongozo and Code of Conduct. So what we are proposing is that we have membership of the board to be 9, in line with the regulations that is in place, Mr. Chair.
I propose a question that clause 6 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. Yes, Honorable Sankok.
The proposals are in line with Mwongozo, and there is no way we can have 12 board members in the process of having an election or voting. In the event that there is a voting, Then if you have 12 members, it will be wrong. The Mwongozo Code of Conduct proposed 9, maximum of 11. So Honorable Chair is in line in proposing 9 members and quorum 5. Thank you.
Honorable Kabinga.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I'm just wondering why the notes are not in the order paper, online order paper.
What notes, Honorable Kabinga?
The amendments.
They must be in the order. The order paper is not online.
It's not online, unless
okay.
I'm not able to open it. And this puts us, Honorable Speaker, this is an area I have a lot of interest, and not having the notes puts me in an awkward position.
Okay, you'll get a hard copy, but in the meantime, Sergeant Atams, please check his machine so that then it is there. I can tell Honorable Mwadi is insisting it is there, but you know, Honorable Mwadi, last time I checked, you are very good at IT, but your neighbor is failing. So, but anyway, before then, let's Honorable Kabinga have a hard copy so that he can.
You know.
Yes, you have seen it in your machine, not in his.
You know, the leader of majority is telling me it's there, and I have opened it and don't have it. It's me who is not having it, not Mwadi.
Yeah, you, Honorable Kabinga, you'll have a hard copy. In the meantime, you'll have your screen sorted. Let's proceed. I propose a question that clause 6 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. I had actually proposed. So I put the question that clause 6 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I now put the question that clause 6 as amended be part of the bill. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Clause 7, clause 8, clause 9, clause 10, and clause 11.
I propose a question that clauses 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 be part of the bill. We have no amendments to those clauses. I therefore put the question that clauses 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 be part of the bill. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Clause 12.
I propose a question that clause 12 be amended as be part of the bill. Honorable Chair, you have an amendment?
Yes, Chair. The amendment is just to clean up spelling mistakes, the error. The word mandatory is also amended to seek that the mandatory approval required according to the regulation under the Act. Chair.
Okay, very well. I propose a question that clause 12 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. I put the question that clause 12 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I now put the question that clause 12 as amended be part of the bill. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Clauses 13, 14, and 15.
Honorable members, I propose a question that clauses 13, 14, and 15 be part of the bill. We have no amendments to those clauses. I therefore put the question that clauses 13, 14, and 15 be part of the bill. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Clause 16.
I propose a question that clause 16 be part of the bill. Honorable Chair, you have an amendment?
And this clause 16 seeks to amend paragraph 2 of the schedules to provide additional ways for members may be removed from the board, Mr. Chair. The members may be removed from the office by the Cabinet Secretary with justification if the member conducts himself in a manner undesirable for a director to carry himself in a way that puts the organization in a bad way. And that the committee notes this provision is ambiguous because it's not giving clear way of removing what is undesirable. So we have in the order paper you will see that the person must be within the confine of chapter 6 and policy, conduct and regulation that is under this public service, Mr. Speaker. So those are the criteria that is put in place.
Honorable members, I propose the question that clause 16 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. I put the question that clause 16 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I now put the question that clause 16 as amended be part of the bill. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Clause 2.
I propose a question that clause 2 be part of the bill. Honorable Chair, you have an amendment.
Clause 2 of the bill seeks to incite the new definition of the terms Cabinet Secretary and monitoring and evaluation. In Section 2 of the Act, Mr. Chair, if you look at it, gives already those definitions exist in the Act with similar words. Therefore, this proposal is superfluous, and hence the amendment is to delete this.
I propose a question that clause 2 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. I put the question that clause 2 be amended as proposed by the Honorable Chair. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye?
Aye.
Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. I now put the question that clause 2 as amended be part of the bill. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Title.
I propose a question that the title be the title of the bill, no amendment to it. I therefore put the question that the title be the title of the bill. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye?
Aye.
Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Clause 1.
I propose a question that clause 1 be part of the bill. We have no amendment to it. I therefore put the question that clause 1 be part of the bill. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Honorable members, we are done with that. The Irrigation Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 12 of 2021. Mover of the bill.
Yeah, Honorable Chairperson, I beg to move that the committee do report to the House its consideration of the Irrigation Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 12 of 2021, and its approval thereof with amendments.
Honorable members, I put the question, which is that the committee do report to the House its consideration of the Irrigation Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 12 of 2021, and its approval thereof with amendments. With as many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. With as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it.
Honorable members, Mr. Speaker.
Who is the chair?
Honorable members, let's proceed. Chairperson. Chairperson looks like it is Honorable Mwadi. Or who is the chairperson? Must be Honorable Mwadi. Mwadi, that was good in the committee of the whole.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to report that the Committee of the Whole House has considered the Irrigation Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 12 of 2021, and its approval thereof with amendments.
Mover.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the House do agree with the committee in the said report. I also request Honorable Sankok to second the motion for agreement with the report of the Committee of the Whole House.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I do second.
Honorable members, I propose a question, which is that the House do agree with the committee in the said report. Honorable members, I will put a question that the House do agree with the committee in the said report. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Mover, please move for that reading.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that the Irrigation Amendment Bill, the National Assembly Bill number 12 of 2021, be now read a third time. Honorable Speaker, as I move this third reading, I want to thank the committee and the House for the expeditious processing of this bill, which, as members will know, is actually a 2021 bill and has actually been processed and completed within this time so that we can sort out the irrigation sector. And particularly, I want to commend the manner in which the Vice Chair of Environment, Sophia Abdi, has, really taken us through these amendments this afternoon with clarity, such that members were able to fast track these amendments. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move and request the Honorable Dr. Nyikal to second.
I second.
Honorable members, I propose a question, which is that the Irrigation Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 12 of 2021, be now read at that time. Honorable members, we shall ped putting the question on that particular matter and until a subsequent time. Well, I thought I had closed that, but anyway, Honorable Kabinga and Honorable Sophia, then we bring a closure to that, then we put the question next time. Honorable Kabinga.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I know I have been overtaken by events, but I need to be on record that I had one or two amendments that I really wanted to bring in. One of them is an important amendment, Honorable Speaker. As you know, through this bill, we did change the name of the National Irrigation Board to National Irrigation Authority. And in line with other authorities, Honorable Speaker, I wanted to bring an amendment so that the head of the authority changes the title from the Chief Executive Officer to Director General, in line with other authorities like Kera, Kura, and Kenha, Honorable Speaker. And I really don't know what opportunity I have, and I want to really apologize because this is something I really wanted to do, Honorable Speaker. I also wanted to look at the period of the head of that institution, Honorable Speaker, in line with other institutions. The term of office, Honorable Speaker, in other authorities is 5 years, and the current term is 3 years, Honorable Speaker. Two very important points that I needed to bring in in form of amendments, and that's why this afternoon, Honorable Speaker, I think I was caught by surprise because the whole week I've had so many matters within my committee that made me to lose track of this particular bill, Honorable Speaker. If there can be a recommittal, I would be so happy, Honorable Speaker, so that I can bring in these two very important amendments. And I think the committee is also in support of those particular amendments. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Unfortunately, Honorable Kabinga, there can be no recommittal. That window is closed. But nothing stops you from bringing an amendment in future as a bill in itself. So the window is closed in terms of recommittal now, but the future isn't closed for you. Honorable Sophia. Yes, we are in that reading, Honorable Kabinga, but the amendments are done in second reading, as you know, up to the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I totally agree with this amendment, and I think at a later stage, because it has been overtaken by time, and at a later stage, because already if you go to the authority, you'll find the CEO is called CEO, and the deputy is called Deputy Director General. So we have that kind of, so even us as a committee, it has taken me by surprise not to find that in our amendments. So, Mr. Chair, on behalf of the committee, I want really to thank the committee members who have taken a lot of time to look at this bill. We have even gone to the field to check on irrigations and how they look like, so that we give new life to irrigation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will also want to thank the leadership of this House for looking at this and giving us the opportunity to finish it as quickly as possible, Mr. Speaker. And finally, I want to thank the members of this House for the support they have given us as a committee. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
I'd say the video is closed on that. We shall pay putting the question on that particular one, that item, to a subsequent time. Next order.
Order number 10, the Social Assistance Repeal Bill, National Assembly Bill number 16 of 2020. Resumption of debate.
Honorable members, this is a resumption of debate really, that was interrupted on Tuesday, September 21st, 2021. So we are just resuming that. There was, I think it had been moved, not I think, but certainly it had been moved and seconded, and proposed, right? Honorable other members, just for avoidance of doubt, let me propose a question. It had been moved yesterday and seconded. Just for record, let me propose a question that the Social Assistance Repeal Bill, National Assembly Bill number 16 of 2020 be now read a second time. We shall start to my left, Honorable Oduor Obaka, member for CIR.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Though this is not what I wanted to contribute to, but it's important to say something. Sorry, let me just take my time a little. I wasn't paying attention.
Honorable Odiabo Akov.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, because we have been consulting, I'm presuming this is a social assistance. Thank you.
Indeed, it is a social assistance repeal bill.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm very reluctant to support the repeal of this bill. Mr. Speaker, the reason why I am reluctant, and I've told the majority leader, who has actually tried to persuade me otherwise, so I might actually consider supporting him reluctantly. But the reason why I'm not very eager to support the repeal is that this act has itself never been operationalized. Mr. Speaker, I know the majority leader has indicated that there is a technical legal issue that why that hasn't been done. And I think there is the better way to go around it would then to bring an amendment to the PFM Act so that we actualize this act, because the idea behind the Social Assistance Act is very noble, to assist those of us who are in very difficult circumstances and those who are vulnerable, of course, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, what's happening, Mr. Speaker, is that this bill was brought by Honorable the late Her Excellency Governor Joyce Laboso, and we worked very, very closely with the Honorable Laboso on this issue, based especially on work that we have done in the civil society and the suffering that we saw a lot of people going through. But Mr. Speaker, I am just worried that we actually have different support mechanisms and protection mechanisms, but most of them are very desperate or disunited, if I would say. They are not, there is no unit or single unit that actually regulates this kind of provision by the government. And Mr. Speaker, because of that, the issue of accountability becomes very difficult. And even knowing who benefits and how, Mr. Speaker, becomes very difficult. And I think I shared on the floor of this House that at some point when people started receiving COVID support, Mr. Speaker, I became one of the beneficiaries without my knowing why I'm a beneficiary. I was receiving 1,000 shillings or something. I can't remember whether it's 1,000 or 2,000 shillings from the government of Kenya as a vulnerable person. And Mr. Speaker, when I tried to refund this money, it was not even clear which ministry I was supposed to refund it to. And I want to thank the CSS who even took their time to call me when they heard that I was calling around trying to find out where I can return 2,000 shillings that would go to support some Kenyan who is really struggling. And so what I would have encouraged the majority leader that what he should have done is to bring the proposed amendment to the PFM Act at the same time as we are repealing this one. But instead of repealing an act, when we do not have another one at hand, Mr. Speaker, my only worry would be that perhaps the more hidden reason behind the repeal is because we have persons who are benefiting from these monies who do not want a regulatory framework. The kind that are sending monies to unknown people like myself as a vulnerable person. So, Mr. Speaker, I am very, very reluctant to support, and for that matter, Mr. Speaker, I will abstain, but I really am not very enthusiastic about supporting a repeal of an act which was unanimously passed on the floor of this House. We didn't see a problem with it then. Why are we seeing a problem now? Other than closing loopholes of misuse of government funds so that the funds goes to the right people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Before I give it to Honorable Olesankok, Honorable Dr. Otiende, is it an intervention? Okay, you are queuing the wrong way, the long queue, but anyway, that is noted. But Honorable Sankok.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support this social assistance repeal bill, Honorable Speaker, because I am a member of the Labor and Social Welfare Committee. I'm also a person with disability. I'm also a member of Parliament representing 6.5 million Kenyans with disability in this House who benefit directly from this social assistance fund. Honorable Speaker, I'd like to thank our chairman, Honorable Kabinga Wadhayo. Wadhayo, Honorable Speaker, means a peaceful person. He's a peaceful person who needed to assist persons who are vulnerable in our society, and that is why he was really very passionate about repealing this one, this Social Assistance Act, so that we can have a fund that is properly managed and a fund that is not done as if it is charity, a fund that is not under the management of a department in the ministry, a fund that depends on the exchequer, which time they think they will release the fund and which time they will not release the fund. Honorable Speaker, I know you are a leader. You represent a constituency on top of being a leader, a speaker here. And when you represent a constituency, I'm sure every early in the morning or even in the evening in barazas, you have found vulnerable people, either older persons, persons with severe disability, orphans and vulnerable children, coming to you and telling you that they have not received their stipend this month. They have not received for 3-4 months. Honorable Speaker, if you follow to it, you may find that it was because the exchequer did not release this fund or some level of mismanagement, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, 30 billion is not chicken change. It's a lot of money that need a board and proper management. If we can have a state corporation like anti-FGM state corporation, only receiving 200 million from exchequer, how can we not have a management authority or board or state corporation managing 30 billion Kenya shillings? Honorable Speaker, this fund is so important because it assists the vulnerable members of our society. The older persons, for instance, our community ties, our cultural ties have been severed by civilization, have been severed by westernization. Most of our people now live in urban centers, and they have left our older persons back in rural areas suffering. Honorable Speaker, some of them are sickly. They go without food, they go without drugs. Honorable Speaker, this bill is very, very important. Honorable Speaker, this bill was brought by the late Honorable Joyce Laboso. May her soul rest in eternal peace. She considered the vulnerable members of our society, because all of us can never be equal. Honorable Speaker, another time I was in the National Council for Persons with Disability. When the request for us to be able to say who will benefit from this fund was brought to the National Council for Persons with Disability, we said it is not all persons with disability, because we don't want persons with disability to be supplicants seeking favors. We need opportunities, not sympathy. We said the other categories of persons with disability whom we can empower, whom we can educate, can benefit from other funds. But those who will benefit from this social assistance fund are those who are severely disabled. Honorable Speaker, we need a board so that we can explain to them what is the rationale of having severely disabled persons benefiting, so that they can see the need of increasing their numbers or even covering the whole population of the severely disabled persons. Honorable Speaker, a severely disabled person is probably autistic, somebody with cerebral palsy. Honorable Speaker.
What is out of order, Honorable Otiende? Amolo.
Mr. Speaker, I respect the Honorable Sankok, and he's started by saying that he's supporting the bill as presented. And yet everything he has said so far seems to be opposing the idea of repealing the act. So, Mr. Speaker, we need clarity. Can the Honorable Sankok make up his mind whether he's supporting or opposing?
Maybe Honorable Sankok is taking a longer route. Honorable Otiende Omolo is very keen on your conclusion.
Honorable Speaker, you know, Honorable Omolo Otiende is a renowned lawyer, learned friend, and very intelligent. He was, I think, the chair of Ombudsman, if I'm not wrong, and he understands our constitution very well. But sometimes when we take him through the longer route, he disappears somewhere in the bush. But I'll bring you to speed that I do support this amendment, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I'm just enriching the bill and even the amendment, Honorable Speaker, so that when we have...
But it is a repeal. Honorable Sankok, it will no longer be there tomorrow.
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Millie Odhiambo is always on a point of order.
Honorable Sankok. Honorable Sankok, there is a point of order from Honorable Akob.
Mr. Speaker, I know that sometimes as members of parliament, we are so busy that sometimes we don't actually understand sometimes the essence of what we are doing. And it is not wrong to acknowledge. When the bill is said to be repealed, it means that bill dies. And I'm hearing Honorable Sankok saying that is supporting amendment. There is no amendment. The bill is going in total. There is no other legal framework now. And that is why you hear me saying that I'm very reluctant to support, because the majority, the leader of majority said they will bring later. There is nothing. So if you are talking about supporting people with a disability, there is really nothing after this. So really, the point of order is just that Honorable Sankok is not in order by referring to that is enriching what is dead. You can't enrich a dead thing. It is dead. If you say you are supporting, then you are saying let the bill die completely. I'm not adding a hand, a leg, or an arm to it. It is dead like a dodo.
Very well.
But if you are not supporting, then it means you are telling him, amend it because there is this part which is defective or not defective.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very right, very good information. Actually, not a point of order, but information through some routes to Honorable Sankok. Actually, this is a repeal of the law. But I'm sure, Honorable Sankok, your thoughts are now packaged in a manner that speaks to what you are dealing with. Honorable Sankok.
Honorable Speaker, this is a bill that we are seeking to repeal. And Honorable Emilio Odhiambo, I know and I understand what is happening here. And when we are repealing a bill, it does not mean that the social assistance fund have disappeared. It means that the social assistance fund is still there and it will still assist the vulnerable persons with persons in our society. And what I just wanted to pass a message to the ministry responsible, that severely disabled persons are persons we cannot economically empower. They are persons who did not have any opportunity to better their lives, unlike older persons who at one time they were strong enough to better their life. It beat all logics to have close to 1 million older persons in the register and only 42,000 persons with severe disability in the register. It should have been the other way around, because the most vulnerable members of our society are actually persons with severe disability, not persons who are older persons. Honorable Speaker, yes, we can assist the older persons, but there must be priorities being set very right. The priority, first of all, is the most vulnerable, and the most vulnerable members of our society are orphans and vulnerable children, then followed by persons with severe disability who require 24-hour care, and then we come to the older person. I think even in the listing and even in the numbering, they should follow that particular order until persons with severe disability are exhausted. Then we can go to orphans and vulnerable children. Honorable Speaker, with those very many remarks, as Honorable Millie Odhiambo had said, I did not see any problem with the bill that was brought by Honorable Laboso. I also don't know why it have never been actualized and implemented up to this stage. And we have to repeal it so that we can make sure, because from 2013 up to date, a whole fund lying there being managed by a department of the Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare. I think it is high time that this House look into it, and that is what we are doing. And I implore upon Honorable Emilio Odhiambo to come along with us so that we can support this repeal of this social assistance bill, so that we can have another act in place that will work and that will be implemented, even though I don't know the reason why it was not being actualized and being implemented. You know, there is a lot of, some of these people, really corruption is really real in Kenya. And I think we should have a cash transfer on the mobile money transfer so that we can even follow this money, whether it is going to the right person or not, to Honorable Emilio Odhiambo. Thank you.
Honorable Otiende.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am opposed to this bill. And I'm surprised that the Honorable Sankok, who spoke eloquently before me, said everything in opposition to the bill, then concludes that he's supporting the repeal. I really don't understand. But I will leave that to himself and his conscience. Mr. Speaker, the Social Assistance Act was actually, from the records, enacted in 2013. Now you are speaking almost a decade, in fact over a decade, almost a decade. Instead of asking ourselves, why has it not been properly implemented, we are going to repeal, and that cannot be the way to go. This is an August House, and in 2013, 9 years ago, it exercised its wisdom, and it took the taxpayers' time to enact a very elaborate scheme under the Act. It cannot be that now we suddenly say that all that effort and all those years were in vain. In fact, all the issues that the Honorable Sankok has spoken to are already in the Act. The Act establishes an authority with perpetual succession, which can be sued in its name or otherwise. It establishes a board. It is so elaborate that I have no idea what else is it that it would require that any member would think for. Mr. Speaker, this Act goes and covers so much that we usually struggle with. You find in Section 20, for example, it covers orphans and vulnerable persons. Section 21, the older persons who are even defined. Section 22, the unemployed. Section 23, which would have concerned the Honorable Sankok, persons living with disability, and it goes on and on. And what the Act tries to do, in my understanding, is to centralize this idea of social assistance. We are a country that tries to experiment with social welfare, but we do not always do it properly. So it's time you find there's a ministry for youth that is giving out handouts. Another time you find there's a ministry giving out persons with disabilities. Another one, older persons. But it is not synchronized. It is my understanding that as we were trying to move towards a welfare state, we were then trying to synchronize all these things so that we minimize pilferage, so that we ensure that only people who are entitled to social assistance get social assistance, and so that we are also sure that we can manage the social assistance that we offer to give, because you can only give what you have. Now, in all this, Mr. Speaker, I am not sure I'm persuaded or have been made to fully understand why this elaborate scheme that we sought to implement 9 years ago has not been implemented, and instead of moving towards implementation, we are moving towards abolition. Because the Honorable Sankok, once you repeal, there's nothing to talk about. It is dead like a dodo. If you want to start anything else, you will start from scratch. In my understanding, if you enact legislation that is imperfect, you do not repeal it. You amend it and improve it. And if there are issues of regulation, even if there are regulations that can come under the PFM Act, Mr. Speaker, can the members who choose not to pay attention give us time?
Order members. Order member. That member. Please consult at a lower tone so that then we are able to hear what Honorable Tiende is saying.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your protection. So, Mr. Speaker, it's my understanding, and I do not doubt that there might be imperfections, but those imperfections should not lead. Mr. Speaker, this disruption and consultation sometimes have a very thin line. So, Mr. Speaker, it's my understanding, and I would be quite willing to entertain and understand and even support any amendments that will make this work. But, Mr. Speaker, to repeal it is to take us back a decade. And, Mr. Speaker, remember, these are not idle expectations. Our Constitution contemplates this kind of social assistance when it comes to social and economic rights. And, Mr. Speaker, therefore, to suggest that because the Act does not tally well with the PFM Act or with the regulations that have been made or not made thereunder is one that does not augur well for me. Because in my opinion, if there's any issue to be dealt with, let it be dealt with either in this Act or in the regulations. But if there are adjustments to be made, we cannot kill a good legal policy because of administrative shortcomings. Mr. Speaker, I oppose.
Honorable Ali Haji.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, from the onset, I wish to support this repeal of this bill. And one of the reasons why I support
is the fact that, and I wish to refer the House to the committee's report, and more specifically on the observation of the committee, which says that the existing act does not provide for the National Social Assistance Fund to receive funding from the Exchequer. And sometimes we pass laws in this House with gaps. And I'm afraid they just concluded a bill on National Irrigation Agency was also one of them. So it is important that we repeal with a view to coming up with a better law that now accommodates all this. And in particular, that in the first place, it was hoped that this act, the ministry would introduce a more comprehensive law in its place addressing all broader sector issues, which it didn't. And I want to also support the fact that once we begin to redo this bill afresh, then areas like Mandera South, we can be able to consider all those members who are vulnerable. The issue of this area sometimes regarded as far-flung, that certain services do not reach. It is therefore very important that we restart the whole process and accommodate and sort of involve the communities that hitherto are always forgotten. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Nyikal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand here to actually oppose this bill. I was involved in actually the bill, the bill and then the act that is now being repealed. And as far as I can see, even looking at the committee report, the only issue is that this authority is going to handle the funds that are currently now being handled with the ministry. That is the only thing. There are statements in that it is not in line with the PFM Act. But I know very many other funds that have also been started, and you have the PFM Act, where those funds also not declared unimplementable. The other thing is that it says that it is not in line with the policy on social assistance. Now, and actually they went to court, and what the court said, the ministry went to court, and what the court said was that there is need to look at time and give the ministry time so that the policy is aligned with the law. I don't think you work backwards, that you repeal a law because it's not in line with the policy, which you haven't even put in place properly. That's what the court said, that is given time. What the court provided for is time to look at the policy, and therefore allowed for the delay in the implementation of the act. So, the Speaker, the only other thing again I can see that would have been cured by just an amendment, I've looked at briefly the act, is basically this would then be an authority that would probably be under the Ministry of Labor and Social Development. So I do not see, I think there's enough room for amendments in this act to make it operational. Mr. Speaker, a lot of funds are actually being used in this social assistance. And I know the history of social assistance. The orphans and vulnerable children, the persons with disability, the elderly persons, all these are the people that actually are supposed to be, and they are very clearly defined in this act. So I don't understand why we will remove an act and therefore replace it with regulation, and then say at the same statement that we are putting it under regulations, but we are coming up with an act. What would have happened is that they would have come straight with an act that would either amend this, or if they're repealing, we would see that most of the components of what is in this act is actually in the new act. But they're not coming with an amendment or a new act that will dictate that we repeal this act. We are basically repealing this act and replacing it with regulations. What I don't understand now, because I know how the ministry works, if this now is being under regulations from the Treasury, and the funds themselves are being managed by in a ministry, what is going to be the relationship there? And even now, as we are, Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of problems in the management of these funds. I know when we started it, it was a smaller program. We had actually have an interministerial committee that was to look at all this. And even when this bill came into place, I think there was consultations around how this would then work and put all these things together. And the social assistance program is intended to be larger. Even it was meant to later on to extend to take care of vulnerable people who live in poor urban areas like Korokocho, Kibera, and actually a bit of it was started in Mombasa, and it was supposed to be extended. So to just repeal this act, replace it with regulations without a substantive amendment bill, I think it's not in order. What I think should happen is that they should quickly come with another act, another bill that is more substantive, that takes into consideration all the contents of this act, and then say, with this, the other act stands repealed. So in my view, I think it is not proper that we should this, and therefore I oppose.
Honorable Ochieng, member for Migori.
For giving me this opportunity. I think the whole issue about this repeal could have not been put better than just the last speaker, Dr. Nikal and Honorable Tiende Molo here have done it. Mr. Speaker, I oppose this repeal, and more so with nothing replacing it immediately. Mr. Speaker, the only thing that I want to add to everything that Honorable Tiende said and that of Dr. Nikal is that I am a member operating with a fund which is managed through those regulations. And I think all the women reps in this house will agree with me that we have had enough problems in the management of GAF. And therefore, when we are just talking about some regulation which is not elaborate enough and is going to still be under the Ministry of Treasury, and that is all we are banking on, Mr. Speaker, this is not going to help this country. The proponents of the repeal are saying that this money is lying idle. Mr. Speaker, I think we are all witnesses in this country that this money has done a lot. I am a witness that even just recently, during the COVID pandemic, I am aware that almost all the persons with disability in Migori County who had not been registered with or the National Council of Persons with Disability received money, cash transfers from the Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare, and all the other persons with disabilities in this country did the same for the first 3 or so months that the pandemic was here with us. In Migori again last year and the year before, we suffered serious damages from floods. This money came handy, and people were rescued, people were given food, and they lived until the floods subsided. So what I think I'm saying is that we have seen this money being put to use.
And the bill that was introduced by the late Dr. Laboso was simply meant to introduce some control over the use of this money. And sometimes we know governments don't like to be controlled. I think what the majority leader should do is to come up with an amendment or some compelling act that must make that other bill operational, not just repealing it, because after all, it has not been made operational as Honorable Sonko would like to convince the House. Mr. Speaker, I think social assistance is necessary in this country. We are witnessing the number of jobless youths in this country. They are young people, but they may need a lot of social assistance. In other countries, they have very elaborate social assistance, especially for the senior citizens and the elderly. Much as this is not very well done in Kenya, I would wish that the ministry actually does it to the latter, so that our elderly people can also feel like they are people who can buy their own soap, buy their own sugar. I think this is the bit that this House needs to address. Mr. Speaker, the number of orphans in this country has increased like never before. We have had pandemics, like even the recent COVID, and HIV/AIDS has been claiming lives of young parents in this country. And so we need these orphans to be helped. Mr. Speaker, widows, some of the young girls in my own county, you know, I'm a pastor, Mr. Speaker, and sometimes when women lose their husbands, pastors would come there and say, you can see Jesus. I don't know how to tell these young women to see Jesus, because they will only see Jesus when that Jesus appears with bread, school fees, a roof over them, and something like that. So the need for social assistance in this country is overwhelming, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, I believe we cannot just repeal this bill the way I heard one of the speakers saying that there is some irrigation to be done in the northeastern. I don't understand how this money can be connected to irrigation. There is enough money that we are giving to the Ministry of Agriculture. Even the other day, we were talking about increasing funding for the irrigation board. So let us put everything into the right perspective. What this House should do, Mr. Speaker, is my prayer that if there are any gaps that are making this money not to operate the way it is supposed to operate, this is the bit that we should do. But I think the need for social assistance for those categories of people that I have just mentioned, Mr. Speaker, is glaring. And if we think the ministry is not using it, I think we should summon that minister and ask them, the CS, the PS, and all the directors, why is this money not working the way it ought to work? Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I stand here to oppose that repeal. Thank you.
Honorable Ibrahim Sahal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, the new regulation aims to streamline the cash transfer program with the funds administered by the Oversight Board through Social Assistance Fund. The objectives and the purpose of the fund is to provide funding for the provision of social assistance for the poor and vulnerable persons, and in particular, among others, to provide for development and promotion of social assistance programs and initiatives in the country, to provide for the criteria for identification, screening, and prioritization of beneficiaries of social assistance benefits, to provide for quality assurance framework to ensure that only eligible persons benefits from the social assistance funds, to develop and promote programs to render the recipients of social assistance capable of self-support and exit from social assistance benefits, to enhance financial capacity of the recipient and the dependent, their dependent, from linkage with other government interventions, to promote and incorporate of recipient into other complementary services and access to better life conditions. I support.
Honorable Didi Nyoro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I rise to oppose because, Mr. Speaker, even as I go forward, it is good for us to know that safety nets and having any form of cash transfer is actually a branch that shows that there is inequality in an economy. In every economy that, Mr. Speaker, that we need to support the lowest and underprivileged, it shows and it is a manifestation that they are not active participants in the economy. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, even as we debate about the cash transfers, and even as we discuss about a security net for those at the lower cadre in our economic society, it is good for us to understand that for an economy to thrive, the economy have to be equal. And for an economy to thrive, we need to involve everyone to be an active participant in the growth and productivity of that economy. And Mr. Speaker, maybe that goes into explaining the reason why in our country at the current moment that we have a lot of need to support people, Mr. Speaker, and especially those who are in the lower cadre. In many forms, Mr. Speaker, even the bursary that we give is a form of security net. Even the kind of cash transfer that we give to the elderly, the over 70, Mr. Speaker, it goes to explain the same. Mr. Speaker, for an economy to thrive properly, all these people that we currently support need to be people that can fend for themselves. And the best way to do this, Mr. Speaker, is for us as leaders, and especially the executive, to have policies that, Mr. Speaker, give them the opportunity to be productive agents within our economy, Kenya. And Mr. Speaker, I say so because if you compare the current regime led by President Uhuru Kenyatta, and if you compare the same to the regime of President Kibaki, most of us went, for example, to university during the time of President Kibaki. We actually went through without the need of bursaries. Not that we come from wealthy families. Like myself, my father was just a carpenter, and my mother a peasant farmer. But because the economy was productive, and Mr. Speaker, there was money to be made in the economy, most of us, Mr. Speaker, just thrived within the same. Even if through hardships, we made it. But in the current administration, in the current times, Mr. Speaker, those at the lower strata in our society will need direct support from the government because there are very few avenues and there are very few opportunities for them to make a living and even to make extra to support their children in school and also to live a better life. And Mr. Speaker, if you look at the current global trades, 1% of the wealthiest in the world have twice as wealth of 6.9 billion people in the country. Mr. Speaker, the billionaires of the world, those who have the status to be called billionaires, meaning they have net worth of more than $1 billion US. Mr. Speaker, those ones combined have as much wealth as 4.6 billion citizens of this world. Mr. Speaker, that goes to explain the kind of inequality that you are faced with in this kind of era, Mr. Speaker. And the data I'm giving is from Oxfam, Mr. Speaker, credible data. Mr. Speaker, even as we make wealth and announce GDP growth every now and then, GDP cannot be eaten. And you cannot pay school fees using GDP. You use the money in the pocket. And Mr. Speaker, that is why even in economics, there is something we call Gini coefficient. Yes, every now and then we get the Treasury and the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics claiming that our GDP is growing. But Mr. Speaker, we don't go further to question, even after the growth of the economy, who are these people who are the beneficiaries of this created wealth? Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the Gini coefficient of our country that measures the inequality between the rich and the poor in our country is just around 4.6. 1 meaning extreme inequality, and 0, of course, depicts a rather unequal society, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the other very unequal societies in the world, actually number 1 is South Africa. And the reason why we see the kind of chaos we see quite often in South Africa, Mr. Speaker, is bred by the gap between those who have and those who don't. And Mr. Speaker, if we don't mind as leaders, and especially those in the executive, to draft policies that distribute the growth of our economy to as many people as possible, Mr. Speaker, will be breeding chaos also in our country. It is bedeviling, Mr. Speaker, to know that the kind of wealth that we are creating in this country, every Kenyan knows. Out of the 47 million Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, when we read GDP growth and when we say that the economy is growing, unfortunately, the majority of the millions of Kenyans still wallow in poverty, Mr. Speaker, even as the created wealth is concentrated to just not more than 10 families. Mr. Speaker, and of course, having the super like 4 families taking over every single wealth that is created in our economy. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we continue to have an economy where a majority are wallowing in poverty, while the little that is created by the technology and any other form of production in our country is concentrated to a few. And that is why many of the Kenyan people just remain as voting robots to keep on voting the same few families that keep on using the same power that we give them to dominate us even further, Mr. Speaker, to perpetuity. Mr. Speaker, we need to address this matter because inequality across is not a very good thing to be encouraged. Mr. Speaker, I say so because if you are to run even from a country like China, and I think I've said that before even in this house, when Deng Xiaoping took over in 1978, most of the Chinese people were actually in dire poverty, in extreme poverty. And just using economics apparatus and using the right policies, Mr. Speaker, he made the Chinese country and the Chinese economy depart from the very retrogressive policies of Mao Zedong, economic policies, like proletarian revolution and the cultural revolution, Mr. Speaker, that had led prior to that to many deaths through famine, Mr. Speaker. And when he came over in 1978, he crafted policies that encouraged a lot of production within the Chinese economy. Fortunately, this was well distributed, Mr. Speaker, because when we build an economy where people can thrive in production, and especially that is based on manufacturing, most of this kind of production, Mr. Speaker, are labor intensive. And when they are labor intensive, what that means is that the fight now between the profit and wages, Mr. Speaker, brings about stabilization of equality. Because when we have people who are working, and especially when they are given an opportunity to unionize, they are able to negotiate for better wages. And better wages, Mr. Speaker, simply means that we distribute money from the profit that benefits a few shareholders to wages that benefits many. I'm still in the Chinese case, Mr. Speaker. By using policies that could spur production based on manufacturing, many of the Chinese people, and to be precise, Deng Xiaoping pulled over 700 million Chinese from poverty, Mr. Speaker, in his term up to 1990. And the basis of the Chinese growth in the economy, Mr. Speaker, is the reign of Deng Xiaoping from 1978. Mr. Speaker, we can learn even the same from South Korea. South Korea was still poor. Actually, at the time of independence, our country, Kenya, actually was richer in terms of GDP per capita than South Korea. The same policies were used, Mr. Speaker, because when we spur the economy through production, and production that is actually labor intensive, what that means is that many people become active participants in the economy, and therefore they may not actually need bursary. They may actually not need cash transfer, because they can literally earn that money through their hard work and through their labor, Mr. Speaker. Having said so, Mr. Speaker, I think it is good for us to have a standalone organization that deals with this. And I think, Mr. Speaker, it will not be good for us to overburden the ministry, because we need a standalone body, Mr. Speaker, to be able to handle, and therefore I oppose the repeal of the Act, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Honorable Amin Kasim, member for Wajir East.
Honorable Speaker, I wish to give my input into this repeal from the onset opposing the repeal of this social protection act. Honorable Speaker, Kenya is an economy that has a lot of disparity in terms of the social and the economic development of this country. Kenya, we have realized nearly 70% of the Kenyans are living and dwelling in poverty. Honorable Speaker, it is enshrined in this Constitution 2010. Article 43 allows every Kenyan to have an access to food security, to basic rights, social protection. It's already enshrined in the Constitution. And this Constitution emphasizes in such a way that all Kenyans can be able to provide and access basic rights, basic human rights. And the fact that this act was there to provide and allows every Kenyan to access those things, then repealing it makes it us to refer back. Honorable Speaker, most of those projects which are still anchored in the Ministry of Treasury gives a lot of disparity in terms of its distribution. You will be finding that if funds are still being held at the Treasury, then it is the whims of that ministry to provide whom they so wish. But the fact that we have an entity that is able to provide for the same and distribute to all the needy persons and be able to provide for health services, for food security, school feeding programs, all those social networks that are desired, then I find it's a retrogressive, and repealing this act, I find it as a very retrogressive, because we have already made gains, and these gains are going to be referred by repealing it and trying to domicile these funds in the Treasury. The fact that it's going to be within Treasury, it is negating the gains we have already did and we have made for Kenyans. Honorable Speaker, this fund, for the first time, for the last 2 years that it has been working, it was able to provide for vulnerable groups, those who have lost their livelihoods. They have lost their livelihood, either basically to drought or basically to lack of employment or as a result of abject poverty which they have had over the years. So, and even those families that are widowed, it's able to provide for social network. The fact that this money, which was initially meant for social protection of those vulnerable groups, and then taking it back in terms of even targeting. It's properly targeted when it is within an institution, within an entity, within the ministry, on an act on its own. Honorable Speaker, taking it back again to the Ministry of Treasury, then I find it an absurd, and we cannot be able to agree onto those things. Honorable Speaker, one observation we have done, and even early years of independence, we have had a country of 10 millionaires and 10 million beggars. Today, we still have a country where we have 40 million beggars, and people are still living in abject poverty. The economy has not been able to thrive, and as a result of poor governance we have observed over the years have been responsible for those abject poverty and the fact that many Kenyans cannot be able to access basic rights like food. And even then, His Excellency Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta has even anchored certain pillars like food security, health, housing, and as a result of even this, what we have observed, those perspectives that we have been observing for has been even been reversed. Today, we do not know where we have left those visions that we have had for Kenyans. The fact that, again, that this program was envisaged for those to support those needy groups and then take it back again to Treasury, we will not be able to achieve. Honorable Speaker, the domicile, for those who are emphasizing to repeal this act, are making us go back. They are making us not to achieve the basic human rights which is enshrined in the Constitution. And Honorable Speaker, I truly oppose these thinkers who think and they want to bring us back to those dark days when we don't need to consider and support our needy persons in our society. Honorable Speaker, culturally we have a social network system which existed over the years. Urbanization, education has affected, and the social networks that existed within the communities have been overridden by civilization. Honorable Speaker, the fact that the government has already taken responsibility of providing for these needy persons, providing social network system, providing for food, providing for school feeding programs, providing for even the needy and the orphans and the disadvantaged family members, we find that was an obligation which was earlier emphasized in this act. But today, again, we reverse those gains which we have done, then I consider it as an absurd and retrogressive, and we do not need to uphold and agree as members of parliament anything that is retrogressive, something that is going to take us back. Honorable Speaker, I oppose, and I oppose totally the repealing of this Social Protection Act. Thank you very much.
Honorable Abdi Yusuf, member for Kamkoji.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to speak on this particular bill, and I stand to oppose it. I think that if you look at the genesis of the social assistant bill, which has been repealed by this particular bill of 2020, first of all, it was enacted to implement Article 43, 1E of the Constitution, which guarantees the right to social security as one of the economic and social rights. So I do agree with some of the other speakers that this is a backward step. It actually removes an important step that we had made in implementing some of the rights in our Constitution, of which this Social Assistant Act number 24 of 2013 had provided. If we look at what it provides, the Act provides for rendering of social assistance to vulnerable persons and establishes the National Social Assistance Authority to identify and provide social assistance to persons in need. And if you look at the composition of our country, this is a country with one of the biggest disparities between the rich and the poor. And therefore, unlike some of the wealthy countries or middle-income countries that are able to provide for their citizens, we have a huge number of people who have no social network, no protection whatsoever, not provided for any assistance under a very difficult social economic system. And in recent years, if you look at the economic downturn, the serious effects of the pandemic, COVID, you would notice that, in fact, even large numbers of people are moving from the middle classes into the lower levels of poverty. And that's why we need to protect the social guarantees that exist as is provided by the Social Security Act. The other important element is that what we need, if there is a need to improve the Social Security Act of 2013, what we need to do is to amend it and to provide and strengthen it through some of the positive elements that I see in this Repeal Act of 2020. But it really doesn't need to be thrown away altogether. And that's why we really need to reconsider, given our economic circumstances, given the large number of people who are in need of support. If you look at Nairobi, which is the capital city, even you don't have to look at our rural poor, is that we have large numbers of very poor people. 60% of our population in Nairobi lives in informal settlements under conditions that would be considered to be below the minimum poverty standards of the United Nations. In those neighborhoods, there is no affordable housing, there is no guarantee for jobs, they don't enjoy any of the social services that are guaranteed in many countries of the world. And then we have a very large number of elderly, disabled people who are left on their own. In some rural areas, maybe there is a support system because of the family structures that exist in place. But in this particular case, in cities like Kenya, in Nairobi, the cities like Nairobi and Nakuru and Mombasa, many of the elderly, many of the disabled people, many of the orphans are left on their own. They fit into the descriptions many years ago that our country was given, that Kenya was more a country of man society, in which these people were left out. What the Social Security Act of 2013 did was to provide protection to some sections of that particular desperate population. And now to come around and to repel the benefits of that act, I must say, and move it to a ministry instead of an independent authority, is definitely going to undermine the intentions of the original bill and also the constitutional article that it supports. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, what I would like to suggest is that we should look at some of the loopholes that exist in the Social Security Act and maybe bring it back with amendments. But I completely oppose the idea of repealing the entire act on its whole. This is not the right thing to do it. To move it into a ministry's authority is not the right thing to do it. I think the Kenyan public would be better served if this act was administered as it is at the moment under an authority other than the ministry. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I oppose the Repeal Act Bill of 2020. Thank you so much.
Let's have Honorable Chieng, then Majority Leader.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, having gone through the Social Assistance Act of 2013, having listened to fellow members contribute on this bill, I'm tempted to request the Majority Leader who is going to speak after me to consider withdrawing this bill instead of, trying to tell us to go along this. Because, Mr. Speaker, where he sits, he will tell you that in law-making processes, we don't move downwards. I've never heard a law being downgraded into a regulation. Mr. Speaker, most of the time, we move regulations into a law. We move a gazette notice into a law. But we hardly ever. Mr. Speaker, I've read the memorandum of this bill. Mr. Speaker, nowhere in this memorandum are we told why we want to add more functions to the Ministry of Finance. It is already so bethammed with so much work to do. But Mr. Speaker, it belies this government's approach, this government's shabby treatment of people who are poor. Mr. Speaker, I'll give you an example before I go into the main bill. I'll give an example. That every year, Mr. Speaker, we talk about hunger. 2 weeks ago, the president declared drought and national disaster in the country. We've been haggling about maize and sugar. Mr. Speaker, would you know that our strategic grain reserves is established under regulations, while the rest of the world, this is established by law? Reason? People want room for corruption. Like in this case, Mr. Speaker, we're talking about no less than 26 billion shillings a year. Mr. Speaker, without any explanation, I'm tempted to think that this is another conduit by the bureaucrats at the Ministry of Finance to get a way of, they're saying, this is so much money going. How can we control it? It isn't about service delivery. It isn't about making it effective. Is it about making more people to get the money? No. It's about creating more bureaucracy to make the disbursement of these funds more difficult. Mr. Speaker, the social... Mr. Speaker, you need to protect me because their language is... What they are talking about is trying to distract me, Mr. Speaker. If you allow me.
Is that Honorable Akoda and Honorable Wanga? Please consult at a lower tone so that then we get to hear what Honorable Cheng is
Mr.
saying.
Speaker, social assistance, social protection is not just about disbursing money. It includes building communities. It includes offering psychological support. It includes building families. It includes things that would create cohesion in the nation. Making it a mechanical job of taking money and handing over to people, Mr. Speaker, is a misunderstanding of what social protection looks like. Mr. Speaker, our law recognizes, the Constitution of Kenya recognizes that Kenyans have the right to social, economic, and civil rights, and including cultural rights, Mr. Speaker. And so, to effectuate social security rights, Mr. Speaker, we have the NSSF Act. To effectuate the right to health, Mr. Speaker, this afternoon, and even what has been existing, is a healthcare provision framework. So the social assistance law was made to also ensure that we have a framework that is broad enough, that takes into account all the needs and all the requirements for facilitation of the assistance of those who may need it. You're talking about orphans, you're talking about jobless people, you're talking about the elderly, you're talking about the sick, Mr. Speaker. I don't in my mind believe that the Ministry of Finance in this country have the capacity to set up the framework and the infrastructure required for this kind of a job. This is a job for the Ministry of Labor and the Social Assistance Protection Authority, which the government has deliberately refused to operationalize for obvious reasons, Mr. Speaker. That every time we see any big money, Mr. Speaker, we think only part of the government should control. That's why you see sometimes they take 3-5 ministries put together, they take 3-4 personnel put together. Even in the middle of a government, you see the president transferring this personnel into this ministry because it's deemed as more lucrative. It's a wrong way of going about things, Mr. Speaker. If we believe that the reason we want to assist, the reason this act was made was to assist those who are vulnerable, those who are not in a position to afford food, those who can't afford health care, those who can't afford medical services, those who are indigent, Mr. Speaker, then what I would imagine the majority would be doing today is to bring a law or push for the implementation of this act as is. But to bring a one-line amendment that will require that a law passed by this House is repealed so that you give powers to a minister, Mr. Speaker, is, in my opinion, a misunderstanding even on the side of those who propose this law. As we speak to him, Mr. Speaker, we have so many MPs that are here to tell you that in every 10 messages you receive, Mr. Speaker, 5 are about death, 2 are about the sick person, 1 is about school fees. It's all these things, Mr. Speaker. Why would someone want to centralize this in one ministry? I don't understand it. In fact, if you ask Mr. Speaker, I would have proposed that this is a role that we push to be shared by the county governments. Because county governments now have roles that are predominantly social. I would imagine that they would have been talking about having county governments helping national government on issues of healthcare, issues of agriculture, as has been put in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just don't know what to say. But sometimes what comes to this House, Mr. Speaker, just surprises you. And that's why yesterday you had members here talking about the VAT. It was brought before this House. We passed it. Then you hear another member of Parliament talking somewhere in a funeral that the fuel prices are very high. Yet they are brought here. When we make our comments and we tell the government who brings these bills through the majority leader that this is wrong, they still ram it through us. This country belongs to all of us, Mr. Speaker. This idea that only some people can manage resources, that only a group of communities can manage, Mr. Speaker, is wrong. We need to start building structures and institutions. We need to start trusting each other. We need to work for all of us. It can't be that every time there is something that has big money, oh, this one should not be given to this ministry. It's wrong. So I would imagine that what we want to do as Parliament is to try to get more money into this kitty. Get more money to this kitty, push for the implementation of the authority, make it more strong, so that Kimunya here and all these people of Kikipiri are able, you don't have to ask questions about those wazes and mamas who don't have money. But to come waste Parliament's time, Mr. Speaker, I'm so surprised. Because since 2013, Mr. Speaker, on this floor we've had the Social Protection Council bill, we've had the PFMA bill proposing the same thing, we've had the Social Assistance bill being proposed. Mr. Speaker, what we should be talking about today would be, how do we promote equity? How do we ensure that we reach more people? How do we ensure that this act is acting well from the constituency level, not at the national level? How do we give MPs a bigger role? Because most of those requests come to MPs. How do we strengthen those vetting committees on the ground? But I've never had something as good as this, that you don't want to give it one individual to be the one making decisions. Mr. Speaker, I oppose with all the breath that I have. Thank you.
Honorable members, I had called the mover, who is a majority leader, to reply, but I can tell Honorable John Badi has come running literally. You want to?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Then we'll have the majority reply.
Mbona utakuleta za ovyo? Wewe unafanya kazi zangu.
Lakini kila ninapokuita lazima unisikize na uniangalie.
Tafadhali ungemrudisha matatizo.
Utamlipa matatizo mshahara wake.
Mara ghafla umeguka baby boy. Tena bila hata